Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm your host, Marquez Mosier, and this is my co-host, cohort, and eldest son, Austin Jordan. He and I always seem to bring out the feisty side of each other, and it leads to some very spirited conversations. There's never really any one topic. We see the world from many different perspectives, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it gets very interesting, so sit back, relax, and have a bit of fun at our expense as we explore some of the most unexpected perspectives you'll ever hear about the world we live in. So, let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm Marquez. This is my co-host. This is my cohort, my co-conspirator. As you could tell, if you're watching, you could tell he's being a little bit of a goofball today because we are starting this year off with remote. We are in 2 different locations for the podcast. So
how many locations?
2.
So
this should be interesting to see how this works out. Hopefully we've got everything dialed in, audio, video, et cetera, et cetera. And how are you doing, Austin?
I'm doing swell.
Swell.
Swell. I haven't done laundry. I adopted a kitten.
Ooh,
and she takes up. Yeah, and I love her. Her name is Theo, and she takes up a lot of my time. And it's difficult to do other tasks that I took for granted before because now I feel bad about leaving her for too long.
Oh my goodness.
She's very spoiled. I think she knows that. But yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's early in the morning. WandaVision came out last night. So I watched that. WandaVision, the show with Scarlet Witch and Vision.
Oh,
the
yeah.
show.
I got you. I know. Yeah, now I'm good.
The first 2 episodes came out last night. They're super funny. Like, that's the biggest takeaway from it is they're really, really funny.
Oh, okay.
And then, because it's like an old sitcom. Is what they have. Like they did it, but it's super funny. I've
seen the previews or I've seen the snapshots or the screenshots and stuff. So yeah, those 2 that would probably be pretty good. I'll have to check that.
Yeah, they're both so good, and Paul Bettany's hilarious.
You know what? You mentioned something. What? You mentioned the fact that you have you take for granted because you time and being able and Theo and not being around and all that stuff. Uh-huh. Some people don't have time. That's a privilege. It's a privilege that you have time.
Are we segue? Oh,
look at that segue.
I have strong feelings about this topic. I think I know what we're talking about.
Well, and it's a couple different things. Tacos. Yes, privilege. Oh. Some people get tacos, some people don't. It's a privilege. It really is.
It's true. But tacos are cheap.
It depends on where you go.
Well, if you're getting expensive tacos, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, we were talking about before... excuse me, we were going to have that subject about privilege. And originally, it started out with the fact that there was some heat that Taylor Swift was taking about 2 albums and all the time that she had. And actually, I think you brought it up was, well, yeah, what else did she have to do? I mean,
because that was super irritating to me. It was like people were like, well, she's privileged. Of course, she can record 2 albums. Like,
yeah,
it just feels like such a stupid argument to me because it's like, dude, we're all it's just because a lot of the times the same people that are complaining about that are the ones complaining about how they're being forced to stay at home. They have nothing to do. They're so bored. They let all their goals lapse. They didn't, they want to get into quarantine shape, but instead they there's like all these things. It's like, okay, so now we're mad at her for recording like music, writing music and stuff. And it's like, we know that she's a storied writer. We know that she writes all the time. She's always been that way. Like, so, and it's not exactly like it's difficult to record an album at home, which is what she did.
Yeah, because I'm sure she has a studio at home and all the other stuff and all that stuff goes with it. Yeah, well,
even if you don't have a studio, there's a bunch of equipment. You can get all this equipment, and of course she has money, so she can get better equipment to do it at home. But it's like, I just, that argument was very frustrating to me.
Yeah, and I agree, because it was something along the lines of, what did you think she was going to do? That's what she does for a living. And the reality is yes. I mean, that goes along with a lot of times when you talk about how actors, actresses, or just in general, they can stay in shape. Well, they have a natural edge because they can hire a professional trainer, chefs, and everything else. And it's not an excuse for the rest of us that don't, but it does make a difference when you have the ability to do that. And
this episode's a little bit, it's going to branch out because privilege, I'm not saying it in any one particular sense. Privilege can be money. We can talk about skin tone. We can talk about, I mean, it's going to be a little bit of everything, but that privilege, people, it's a double-edged sword. People can use it for good and they can use it for bad. It shows up. It's very similar in some ways, I think, to being grateful and gratitude. And I think that the two can be interlinked. I'm not, as weird as it sounds, as a soundbite, this is going to be horrible, but I'm not a big fan of gratitude. And I say that in the sense of, I'm talking about the kind of gratitude when everybody is, I mean, be grateful for what you have, be grateful for this, be grateful for that, be grateful for this. And if you're more grateful, then you're going to get more grateful. I get it. Yes, be grateful for what you have, because what you have, what you're complaining about, someone else may be dreaming about. That kind of thing. And it goes hand in hand with privilege, where some people, if you're grateful for many things, then almost by definition, you have privilege, because you're privileged to have all of those things. Even if it's just, health and family. I mean, because a lot of people don't have health, don't have family. They don't have the same privilege of knowing that they're going to live for 50 more years or whatever.
Well, and that right there is why I don't really like the whole privilege, like the modern concept of privilege. And I've been pretty outspoken about it for like the past, I don't even know, probably since the beginning of high school, when people talk about privilege, it's like, it's become this like overarching thing for anything that you have, anything you don't have, this whole comparison. That's the thing I hate the most, is the comparison and the competition of privileges. Well, you have this privilege, I have this privilege, or maybe you don't. And it's, I hate that, because I feel like anybody can say that anything is a privilege. It's like the fact that I get to wake up this morning is a privilege because it's, I've been given life.
Right.
Like, I think that's kind of dumb, to be honest. I think that's pretty stupid. It's like, because it's like, no, life is a natural function that happens.
Right.
Is that something I'm necessarily privileged to have? Or what if I don't want to be alive? What if I'm suicidal and I wake up? Am I privileged to get what? Right.
It hurts because...
Am I privileged to get something I didn't want? That's why I really don't like the concept so much of the modern privilege.
And it goes along, that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was talking about with the grateful. Like, be grateful that you woke up. Sure, okay. But then again, on the other hand, why would I have expected not to? Unless, of course, I was sick or something like that. But in the, just normal occurrences, why would I expect not to have woken up?
True,
mean,
and I can already hear people telling us that we're tone deaf when we have this many Americans dying every day from a natural pandemic.
But even there, it's kind of like, okay, so let me guess. So let's say, do you have a place that you can shelter in home? Can you work from home? Did you lose your job? You know what I mean?
Right.
In that case, I would be considered extremely privileged, because I can basically shelter in home whether I had to or not.
Yeah.
I mean, does that mean I'm privileged? Should I be grateful for that? Well, yes, at some level, but
I think, yeah, exactly that too. And then I think what another thing that I've always, in the modern sense, is I hate how weaponized the concept of privilege has become. Like the whole, well, you have this, so I'm going to be mad at you for this because you have this privilege, and I think that's unfair. Or, and that could be applied to any number of things. It could be you have an abundance of time, you have an abundance of wealth, you have an abundance of whatever, or even skin color. Yeah, exactly. It's like something like that. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I think that it's counterproductive in most cases. I mean, some cases it's like, yeah, if somebody's using their privilege, like what you said, in a destructive form, that's obviously bad, and we should hold people accountable for that. And Donald Trump has the privilege of being the U.S. president, and he abuses that all the time.
Yeah.
We should call him out on that.
Yeah, and you should take advantage. I mean, like I said, it's a double-edged sword, because the privilege is something, I guess there's a fine line between something that's a privilege or something that you've earned. I think that's an aspect we didn't look at. If I've earned something, if I've worked for it, Is that a privilege? Did I create my own privilege? Like, I'm privileged to live in a certain area because of the income I have, but I worked, my butt off in order to get that income stream. So am I now privileged to live in that area, or did I earn it? Because privilege also to me has a connotation of it was given to you. It was something that you didn't necessarily control. Like back to Taylor Swift, it's kind of like, well, and for the most part, she's earned the ability to live in a place where she has a studio in her house that she can write 2 albums. I mean, a lot of musicians, obviously, think of the destruction COVID had last year. A lot of musicians didn't have that ability, So, but should she be held accountable for that? I'm like, I don't know. She worked for it. She tried. I mean, she got to that level.
And it feels a little bit like a double standard because artists like DaBaby, who's one of the biggest rap stars right now, I think he released like 3 projects last calendar year. But nobody was saying anything. And that's not to throw any shade at DaBaby. I love DaBaby. I think he's super talented. And I'm glad he released that many projects. But keep the same energy. Like, where's that energy then? It's like, oh, yeah, good for him. He's so hardworking. But Taylor Swift, she's privileged. Like, it just, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And I think that it's counterproductive to a whole movement because I think I understand what those people are trying to do. They're trying to put things into perspective of, well, don't be upset if you didn't accomplish what you did because she has more resources than you'll ever have. I get that.
Yeah.
But, well, actually, I don't even know if I necessarily believe in that. But I understand the message.
Right.
I understand the message. But you can't cherry pick. That goes against the message. Is you can't then be like, oh, well, and just choose to ignore anything outside of your argument. That means you don't have a very good argument.
Yeah.
So you have to, like...
You brought up a good point
ahead.
there about whether or not, DaBaby and Taylor Swift, could that also lead into the elephant in the room when we talk about white privilege?
Right,
because
but
she's
I don't even...
blonde-haired, white, what light-skinned white girl.
Yeah, but I don't even know how much good that conversation even does anymore. Especially in the music world, in the entertainment world, and all that stuff. Because
I was actually thinking more along the lines of just strictly the fact that for him, he did 3 albums, and it could almost be just a man-female thing. It could be a man-woman thing. He's hardworking. Well, when the woman does it, she was entitled. You know what I mean? She was privileged. She was able to do it. But yet when the guy did it, well, he's, it's also the elements of being rap, which is, a little bit more, quote unquote, it's a different image as far as her music and what rap music is. Things like that. Because, I mean, obviously, since we're recording this after last week was the insurrection at the Capitol, and we know damn well that had that been, if you had flip-flopped that with color, we'd be having a totally different conversation right now.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's I heard something about when you talk about white privilege, because it exists, and I'm almost hoping that what it feels like, which I hope it's not, is that it's getting overused where people are starting to get immune to it, desensitized to it. And they start to ignore it, and then they'll come up with some other thing. But I saw a post that was really good when they said something along the lines of, if you have never had your civil rights argued in front of the Supreme Court, you have privilege. And I'm like, that one actually is very good, because if you want to say that it doesn't exist, then why in the world would a group of people have to actually ask for their civil rights and you don't? I mean, it's kind of like, okay, so everything that you get that they don't because of the laws, by almost definition, that's privilege. You didn't earn it. You just came out that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But even again there, I don't know if you have the Irish, you have the Asians, you have, I mean, the
white privilege. No, I'm not saying that you could still take it in. When I guess when I say white privilege, and this is something I put a little asterisk on, it's a lot like God, capital G, lower G. when I hear white privilege, it's almost a lot of times we've talked about this where it goes into almost, is it really white as in, should it be called green privilege? Because there's such a socioeconomic factor into it as well. But when I say white, if I'm going where I think you're going, it doesn't necessarily mean white people, because you're right. Back in the day, turn of the century, the Irish were discriminated against, the Italians.
And I just meant historically about like fighting for your rights and all that stuff, like in front of the Supreme Court, and then and the elderly too. I mean,
but
the
they
Civil
did too.
Rights Act.
For the example,
I
for
know
the
that's
Chinese,
my point.
like basically like in the mid 1800s,
right? And the civil right, exactly. That was my point. Was those groups did, and then even in the Civil Rights Act, it includes it's like, I mean.
The protected classes
elderly,
of the federal government.
the protected class. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is, though, that was actually just summarized it, though, that all of those people, if you don't believe you have privilege, it doesn't necessarily have to be white privilege, but if you don't believe you have privilege, then that's just wrong. Because
true, I'm playing more so devil's advocate here, but here the people that this is why the topic privilege for me gets super dicey, and like why I try to avoid it most of the time. But the main target for almost all attacks on privilege, and though they're probably right most of the time, just playing devil's advocate here, are against old white men. But if we cherry pick which privileges are more important than others, then you're basically saying that the protected class of the elderly is less important as a privilege that is like, let's say, skin color or age, anything else. And then that's what it's like, okay, well, now you're ranking different, what's it called? What word do we want to use? Like different
socioeconomic groups, or just social
not
groups,
even socioeconomics, but
tiers, caste,
like
caste
different
system.
different tiers of like societal handicaps. And now we're starting to rank them. And is there an objective ranking for it? Maybe there very well might be, but it becomes very difficult then to navigate.
Here's a good one. Here's a good example of kind of throwing a little monkey wrench into it. So you're on a ship. You're on a cruise ship. It's sinking, right? They have lifeboats. They probably don't have enough lifeboats for everyone, although they're supposed to. Even traditionally, let's just go with traditionally, right? Who gets to get on the lifeboats first?
Women and children.
All right. So there's a privilege, because just by the nature of them being a woman or a child. But what if that child's sick? Or what if it's an old woman? Should that old woman take the place of a young woman? Old woman's technically had her. I mean, that conversation's come up with the COVID vaccinations. But like you just said, you're ranking them. You're like, all of a sudden you have ranks within ranks, because you say women and children go first. Which women? All of them?
Yeah.
What, you know, and
then right. And then it's like, it becomes something that's competitive and comparative. And I feel like that's kind of the wrong direction to go in. But I feel like that's more or less where things have been trending for a while now. And I understand the intention.
Seeing if it cleans it up, if it was a dirty camera, or if it's just a bad signal.
I don't think so. But I feel like that I understand the intention. The intention is to make a more level playing field, to help the disenfranchised, to help people that might need a little bit more, but I'm not sure it's necessarily really accomplishing that. It
all comes back to, that's why we have to be very careful when we throw around the terms privilege. You know, is it because somebody actually did a really good, made a point about when I said, and I've been guilty of it, when you say, well, it must be nice. And someone goes, don't say that. That person that you're saying it must be nice to probably worked their ass off in order to get what they got. If you want it, work your ass off. Make the sacrifices that you need. Now, this is generalization, of course, but the point was well taken. Like, I learned way back when I heard somebody say, you know, don't ever say, why me? You will never catch me saying, why me? Because that I mean, now we call it a victim mentality.
I don't like why me. Why me, I don't like. But
we call it, we call it a that victim mentality. But before, even way back when, it was why me. It's like, that perspective, that mind of you know, what are you doing? Why, you know, is it my fault? Is it your fault? that aspect of it comes along with the privilege aspect of saying, when you say why me, and you're talking about, whatever you're just decrying, there could be so many people that wish they had what you had, and you're sitting there complaining about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Why me? I hate. That other one must be nice. Whoever blew up about that, they're just too sensitive. It's just like,
and it was kind of like, because there's some cases where, yes, most of the time, so when you say it must be nice, you are jealous. I mean, you're usually in a jealous or envious state when you say must be nice. Think about.
Yeah, true. But there's nothing wrong with jealousy or being envious, because a lot of times that's a huge motivation to do something.
And that was their point. That was their point.
Yeah.
Was to actually then, use it as motivation, use it as as a fire. So.
Right. And then that's true. We're getting off the point. I was going to say, and then a lot of times it's just a joke. Like,
correct.
So it's like,
correct.
Yeah.
It
so
is.
It's like, yeah. And then also I think that person's giving other people too much credit. Like,
yeah.
I mean, let's ask him. Let's ask that person realistically. Do you realistically think that most of the people that we look up to or think did an amazing job or whatever really worked that much harder than an average person? Like,
No,
and honestly, a lot of the times the answer will be no.
Yeah, because you know what? They had privilege.
Well, they probably had some sort of help. There was probably some sort of thing. There are people that work from the very bottom and make their way up.
But you know what? You just brought up a good point about that, is that what do we consider when someone catches a break? And yes, you make your own breaks. Don't get me wrong. I honestly believe that when preparation meets an opportunity, that creates luck. But it's impossible not to consider things that are just lucky. And by lucky, it's just you didn't plan for it. It just happened. Mm-hmm. It was you were in the right place at the right time. Those things do happen. For someone who says, I don't believe in luck at all, okay, fine. If you don't want to call it luck, but you can't tell me that every single thing is planned. Single thing. Yeah. And when you have that aspect, was it privilege or was it luck? Because there's a difference. Mm-hmm. Did they just get, was it because they were born into the right family, that they had the right doors open for them? Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's privilege, because someone who doesn't have that doesn't get it. Right. But someone who absolutely, who happened to walk into the wrong room and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, what were you looking for? And they say it and they go, oh, you know what? Actually, we're having a conversation. Do you mind? We need that input. And, something happens. Well, that was luck. You walked into the wrong room,
Right. Yeah. Very true. Talking about bases and how, because you said something that made me think of how important a strong familial base is, and how that is arguably, to me, probably the greatest privilege you can have. Because if you're brought up with a strong family, and sometimes that can mean fiscally, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe it just means support or people around or people believing in you or whatever it is. To me, that might be one of the strongest privileges somebody can have, because that is going to, how do I exactly articulate it?
You could use the house metaphor.
What's the house metaphor?
Strong foundation.
You have a
strong foundation to build anything on top of it.
That'll generally lead to you believing in yourself and putting yourself into more situations, even if you fail. The amount of sheer volume of different things you'll get yourself into, eventually something works.
You are missing something. You are missing something. You're assuming that just comes naturally from family. It does not. It comes from the family that actually believes and purports that and encourages that. Well, okay.
That's what I said. Like a family that believes, and I used the word believes. Yeah.
Okay. Then I might have missed that, because you're right. Just having the family itself, as we well know, that can actually be a detriment.
It's not having a it's having a family that believes and having a family that supports you. That stuff is important. I do also think coming from a family of money is probably the second most important thing that you could have.
Because it's money. They say money doesn't buy happiness. No, it does not. But it certainly buys opportunity. And what you do with that opportunity.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and money does buy a certain freedom.
Yeah. Well, depending on what you do with it. See, a lot of people can make a lot of money, but if they spend a lot of money, they're actually trapped to it. They don't have freedom. Mm-hmm. They're trapped by it. That's why, like
Right.
I've told you guys, the biggest thing you guys can do is just try to stay out of debt. I mean, some debt's fine, but if you can do that, you will have the privilege of being able to do whatever you want with the money that
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah.
Because people don't, and if they spend it incorrectly, they lose. They basically sacrifice that privilege of opportunity. And what was disconcerting in this last week with what happened at the riots and stuff was, and I made a post about it, was how so many people were trying to correlate the two, saying that they were equal and saying that they were right. And it almost felt like anybody who was going to say that was not recognizing the fact that it was wrong, and that to say that you have to be coming from almost a position of privilege, because
I would agree.
The inability to recognize the difference, or to just truly say with a straight face that had all of those people been black or just people of color, you really think the response would have been the same? I mean, that's dumbfounding. Just like when we started it off with Taylor Swift, kind of like, well, what did you expect her to do? That's not privilege. It wasn't, she didn't have the privilege, of working and getting 2 albums done. It was exactly what you would expect her to have done. I mean,
Right. Yeah, exactly. I see a lot of people comparing them as well, but it's I agree with, like what you said. I'm trying not to be like aggressive about it, but yeah, like what you said, you do have to be coming from a place of maybe not even necessarily privilege, but a certain veil is over your eyes if you can't recognize the difference between the two. And I get so caught up in the people say, well, it's unfair to blame President Trump because Trump never said to destroy anything. Okay, even if you take Trump out of the equation completely, like let's say he doesn't exist, you have a group of people who physically broke into the Capitol versus people who were maintained by armed police, National Guard, all that stuff outside of the Capitol. Which group are you condemning more? Yeah. And they're condemning the people that were kept out of the Capitol, who did far less damage to the Capitol.
Yep.
But the people that got inside the Capitol, well, they're just being misrepresented. What?
Yeah.
You sound like an idiot, and I'm sorry, because I've really tried to toe the line between not calling you out or not calling people out or saying like, well, blah, blah, blah. I've really tried. But if at this point you still don't get it, you're not a Republican, you're not a conservative.
No,
period.
I agree.
You're not.
And that's becoming more obvious. That they're actually that's becoming a talking point.
Right. You're a Trumpian. You support a man. You do not support the rest of the stuff. Period. And if you want to have this debate, to anybody who's watching this and might get offended, we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
But just, you want to talk about feelings, don't care about, I'm still talking. Sorry, we're going to get through this. Okay. You want to talk about facts don't care about your feelings? Facts don't care about your feelings. When you break it down to its core logical base, you are not supporting America. You have every top Republican leader, people that you would have supported, a Mitch McConnell, a Mitt Romney, a Lindsey Graham, before Trump even got into office during Obama's term. These are the people you idolized. Now, you're saying their opinion doesn't matter. They're a sellout, and they're blinded by the deep state. You are an idiot. I'm sorry. You just kind of are. You're not, and maybe I'll rephrase, you're not an idiot, but you're blinded, and I feel bad because this person, one man, Trump, has done that to you. He's blinded you.
He will go down as one of the greatest con men, hucksters ever. I had this conversation with my mom, your grandma, about how we were talking about history, and I said it's unfortunate we'll have to wait the 10 years, 15 years to go by for it to be recorded, for people to see it like that. Oh, and to bring it back, to relate it to that, is they talk about, we're talking about this privilege, so to speak. Well, there was accounts where they were, the rioters were upset and calling the police traitors and for doing their jobs, for trying to hold them out, and that they seemed genuinely surprised when they were being pushed back or when they got sprayed with pepper spray, and they actually
I saw
showed
that too. Yeah.
that they didn't understand why they were being treated like this. And just ask any black person, any protester from the summers, they'll tell you why. Because you're doing something illegal.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be on the Capitol grounds.
Yep.
Like the other thing, the one main point, and this is like, I guess I can leave it alone after this, but there were too many Trump flags, not enough American flags, and that's how I know this had very little to do with America, and very much more to do with one person.
And it's funny because we're having this conversation. The ability for any of us to be able to do this, the protests and stuff, is a privilege. That's a privilege. As American citizens, we have that privilege over other countries that don't. So again, now, did we earn that? Well, we were born in the United States and became citizens. So, you could argue, well, you didn't really earn it. It just happened. It happened to you.
Right.
But being able to, if you abuse it, or using it in the wrong way. Here's a great case of using it in the right way and using it in the wrong way. Okay, there's two examples right there about how it's a double-edged sword. You have this privilege. What are you going to do with it? The aspect of, like, when you talked about ranking things, almost anything can be attributed to being a privilege. And we're not using, I think, the terminology properly, because some things are considered privileges, some things aren't. When we need to get back to the truth of the matter, that are you getting an advantage that isn't necessarily afforded to anyone else and that you didn't necessarily earn or create?
Right.
That's privilege. That's what it's, to be privileged. And you don't necessarily want to get too deep into that, because if someone has a lot of money, if it's a lot of family money and they say they're privileged, okay, what if you have a lot of money but you've earned every cent of it? Are you still privileged? I think it also depends on how you act after that. Do you act quote unquote privileged?
Yeah, what do you do with it? Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. And the way you just phrased it, that's exactly why I don't like to dive into the whole privilege pond. It's too dicey. I don't think there's ever a productive way to really dissect it on a large scale. If we break it down into a micro scale and talk about, situation by situation, then of course it's easier to do that way. But on a macro scale, it's impossible. You can't measure. And then you want to talk about we've talked about this before, is the concept of relativity. How do people, an individual, how do they feel something? So, and now you're breaking down, well, you say this person has their privilege. You're telling them how they feel. You don't know how they feel. You could be right. You could be wrong. It doesn't really matter. But there's no way of ever objectively pinning it down in most cases.
Right.
And it's counterproductive, and it's usually talking out both sides of your mouth, because a lot of the people that talk about, well, everybody has their individual feelings, will also tell somebody how they feel. And that's not, again, it's not a very strong argument if you can't follow one course all the way through.
Yeah. And I hope that people start to recognize that as you're looking at situations and you're taking different perspectives and you're trying to see things from different and multiple viewpoints, before you get too quick to say that they're privileged, asking yourself, are they really privileged, or do they they have something that you don't, and you're just jealous or bitter about it? And vice versa. Some of the things that you have, you could just remember that you may be considered privileged. People might actually consider things that you have as a privilege, or running across people that, if they, for example, those who are disabled, versus abled. Yeah, some of those things you can be grateful and be privileged just to make sure, like you said, it's getting watered down. So let's not be quite so quick to judge when
Right. There needs to be more understanding of people to people. Just blanket, whoever you are, on an individual level. How do I treat you? How do I see you? How do you see me? All the it need like there's just needs to be more empathy across the whole nation. That's the thing. I think that's the biggest thing that we lack as a nation right now is empathy.
Yep.
We have none. There's like on a large scale, I would say that we have almost close to none
it's going to be
empathy goes.
I agree. Empathy has been something that I've really, really think is incredibly important, and it's so different than sympathy. And right now, though, it's going to be a test because you're hearing calls for, you're hearing calls for unity and that we need to move on, and no, we shouldn't be doing the impeachment and things of that sort. And it's true. Those things are good and we do need them, but there is a place for them because accountability, there is no way to move on, learn the lessons from your mistakes and stuff, unless there's accountabiliity. And it doesn't mean wherever you stand on impeachment and all that stuff, it's almost irrelevant. The point being, though, is that I have discovered, or not discovered, but I have seen that many times those who are saying we need to come together, we need to move on, we need to be able to move past this, are this mostly, or a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times, are the people that are realizing that they are losing whatever advantage, whatever privilege they had. And they are now trying to basically say, well, let's hurry up and move on and get to the next thing, because they understand that they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be held responsible for the things that happened. And it's really nice to say, oh, well, we should all come together. We should all, just, move on. That doesn't do any good to keep dredging it up. And you know what? That's true once the accountability has happened, once the responsibility has happened, not before.
Very true. Very true. And then piggybacking off of that, one thing that I see a lot of, and it's dangerous because, like you said, there are some people that are admitting they're wrong to take advantage of a situation to kind of spin out of it and absolve themselves of responsibility. But there's also a lot of people that are admitting they're wrong, and they're not being. I mean, they're kind of being criticized for basically like, well, yeah, I was wrong. I don't believe this anymore. I'm doing this, and then it's like, oh, well, you're giving up. Like this, like, you've been evil for this long. It's like, okay, well, yeah, but we have to encourage people changing their minds. We have to encourage people growing. We have to encourage people admitting they're wrong or admitting their faults, trying to move on from that and stuff. And some people maybe we shouldn't do that for. Maybe they're too far gone. But the vast majority of people, like, I think that we need to do that for, and we need to listen to them. And I'm concerned because I see a lot of backlash against that, and I think that, again, it's a very counterproductive thing.
I think the biggest thing is the age-old concept of giving someone a way to save face.
Yeah.
If we want to be able to move on, we can hold them accountable. You can hold them responsible, but you have to give them a way out. You have to be able, in that, extending that olive branch and extending that part of it is necessary, but it has to be done in a way that they can look and then be able to basically admit that they were wrong, because that's so difficult. That's the hardest thing to do in the world. And if we can do that, then that is truly, I think that's a privilege that we can all give ourselves, that if we can realize that, don't be vindictive. We need to do the accountability, responsibility, but also realize that at some point, yes, it's time to move on. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate privilege that we can give all of ourselves, is combine that, like you said, with empathy and all of that. And I think that would go a long way to helping a lot of the issues that we have. So
yeah,
that sounds like a nice little place to kind of roll things up. So remember, think more, care more, live more. Are you making fun of me?
I would never.
Oh, yes, you would. If you're on the video, you can see him echoing it. But it's
true.
I
wasn't echoing.
Think more, care more, live more. And remember, you can change your life. We can change the world one decision at a time. Anything else, Austin?
Nope. I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, hopefully you like this. Hopefully when we get this all done, taken down, we'll have audio, video, and all that good stuff. And we will see you next time.